Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 6:30. WMAL.
It's 7:37.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Man, I love that movie. 7:37 on WMAL.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Brian Wilson and Mary Catherine Ham here. And we also have with us, as a child, it was my aspiration to be a shark expert. I wanted to swim with the sharks. That was like, as an 8-year-old, that was my little girl's big dream.
You're a very strange
I
child.
know, but I didn't make it. But we have the guy who did. We have Andy Dehart with us, who's Director of Fishes and Aquatic Invertebrates at the National Aquarium Institute and is a shark advisor for the Discovery Channel. How you doing, Andy?
Who better to have on the show on Shark Week? I mean, really.
I know. So it's Shark Week at the Discovery Channel, and I'm very excited about that. It's one of my favorite weeks all summer.
It's certainly my favorite holiday.
Exactly. Well, it's really popular, and I wanted to ask you about one of the things you got coming up as a show about rogue sharks.
Yes, rogue sharks really kind of takes a look at the kind of the philosophy around one animal being a bad seed, and that one shark can stay in a particular area and attack on repeated attacks on people, and perhaps maybe gets a taste for humans, and that might motivate it. It really kind of takes a look at that theory and whether that holds any water or not.
Now, is that the attacks on the Jersey Shore in 1916, which is what Jaws was sort of based on, is the theory that maybe a rogue shark was behind that? Does anyone know? That's
certainly where the theory got started. There were a series of 5 attacks over the course of about 10 days up in 1916 in New Jersey. Those attacks are credited to a great white. I think if you talk to a lot of different shark scientists, myself included, we think that science wasn't what it was today. We didn't have the forensic abilities that we do now. I think we would not be surprised if we found out that was ultimately a bull shark or several bull sharks that did kind of perpetrate those cases. So
how credible is this theory? And if a rogue shark existed, what makes it tick? What turns it into one?
Well, I think you'll have to tune in. Rogue Sharks actually did premiere on Monday night, but the great thing about Shark Week is we get to replay all the premieres throughout the days. But certainly tune in. Without giving too much away, I'll say that I don't fully believe in the rogue shark theory. I think obviously for me personally, I've worked with sharks for over 20 years, and I've never seen a shark that has kind of maliciously had a taste for humans.
Right.
We know there's over 500 species of sharks, and not one of them has human beings on the menu. So it's usually a case of mistaken identity. There's a lot of cues that are given off. Perhaps in murky water, they hear a splash that sounds like a fish, or they see the high contrast color of someone's hand flashing in the water, or perhaps there's a lot of fishing activity going on, so there's a lot of smell in the water, and that sometimes can confuse these animals.
In Washington, D.C., I think we're especially interested in this because it's sort of like we know a good shark when we see one in Washington, and, it's sort of a matter of professional courtesy that we pay attention to sharks on Shark Week. But I spent a lot of time down in the Florida Panhandle coast, down that Destin, Fort Walton Beach area, and I have heard it said down there that we actually are probably interacting with sharks a lot more than we realize.
I would say that's true for most beaches around the world. I would say that if you're an active beach-goer, you've had a good encounter with a shark, and by a good encounter with a shark, it's one that you probably didn't realize happened. The shark did its own business and swam by, and
you didn't even notice
it occurred.
Yeah, and let me ask you another. This is sort of out there a little bit. I always was fascinated by the Natalie Holloway story, down in Aruba. Mm-hmm. And when I was in Aruba a long time ago, I visited the island. I went to the rocky side of the island, and they showed me a boat that was out there. And I said, "What's that boat doing?" They said, "Feeding the sharks." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, they feed the sharks on this side of the island so that they don't go around to the sandy side of the island where all the tourists are." Does that kind of thing go on? I've always had this theory that if the tragedy of Natalie Holloway was, if that is indeed true, that she was thrown off the rocky side of the island.
Well, there are shark feeding dives that go on around the world. The Bahamas is very famous for their number of dive operators that do these shark feedings. And what we know from those feedings is that we are impacting a very small group of animals, and by impacting I mean we've very slightly modified their behavior to have more sharks in a given area than you would typically but we're not changing their behavior to the point that that's the only place that they come to get food. What we do know is in an island probably the size of Aruba or the size of New Providence that you're not pulling all of the sharks from that island to the feeding location. I've been on different sites, even down the southern end of New Providence, where they're doing a lot of the feeding in the Bahamas. And while the feeding dive is going on, I've had encounters with reef sharks further down the reef. So we know that we're not, impacting every shark on that island by doing these feeding sites. And the good of it is, people come away from these dives with a very new respect for sharks, and that they're not mindless eating machines. They're very calm. They're very calculating in terms of they've got a specific diet, and that's what they eat.
Well, you guys have a chief shark officer this year. This is Andy Samberg, and I have to say he's a lot more famous and a lot funnier than I am. But if you guys ever need an assistant, you just let me know.
Right. We will certainly keep your name on the short list.
Because I will jump in that water. I will. Just tell me where to go.
It's great. Last year we had Craig Ferguson, and this year we've got Andy Samberg, and hopefully these folks still want to keep coming out and getting that experience with sharks. It's great. It was great. I know the production team that worked with Andy had a blast getting him in the water with the sharks.
All right, listen. Thank you for joining us, Andy Dehart. It's Shark Week
expert.
That's right. What a cool title. I want that